A black girl pretends to have a feast with empty plates. A billionaire sees her and is shocked. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's begin. It was a cold evening, the kind where the wind bites at your skin and the stars seem far away, like distant promises. The grand mansion, with its tall iron gates and ornate windows, stood like a fortress on the hill. But the noise inside the grand hall, the laughter, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, was drowned out by something more subtle, more pressing. On the other side of the gates, in the cold, a small girl stood alone. She was no older than 7, her clothes worn and faded, the soles of her shoes scuffed from too many days of walking on hard streets. Her hands clutched something, a small plastic plate, tipped over to one side, with nothing but a few crumbs scattered on it. She wasn't looking for food. She wasn't begging for money. She just stood there, pretending to have a feast. The wind whipped her hair around her face, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. Her eyes were fixed on the mansion ahead, as though she could see beyond the gates, past the lights, into a world she could never reach. Inside the mansion, a billionaire named Ethan Caldwell was preparing for his evening dinner. He was used to the noise, the distractions. But tonight, something felt different. There was a weight in the air, an unexplainable tension, as if something was waiting to unfold. He stepped out onto the balcony, just as he did every evening, his gaze sweeping over the horizon. But tonight, it landed on her, the little girl. She was still standing there, frozen in place, holding that empty plate. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He was used to seeing people on the streets, but this one was different. Something about the way she stood there, unmoving, pretending. It struck him. Without thinking, he found himself walking down the grand staircase, across the courtyard, and toward the gates. The guards didn't stop him. No one dared to question him. As he reached the gates, he stopped a few feet away from her. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently, though he already knew the answer. The little girl didn't reply immediately. She just looked at him, her dark eyes wide but steady. Then, with the smallest of smiles, she shook her head. "No, sir. I have everything I need." Ethan blinked, confused. What did she mean? She was standing in the cold, wearing nothing but a thin jacket. But her eyes didn't show fear, or hunger, or even desperation. Instead, they showed something else, something like pride. He took a step closer, his curiosity piqued. "Why are you out here by yourself? What are you doing?" She paused before speaking, her voice quiet, almost too soft to hear. "Pretending," she said simply. "Pretending to have a feast." Ethan's heart twisted. He didn't understand. A child, pretending to have a feast? In the cold, with nothing? He stared at her for a long moment, the silence between them growing heavier. And then, as if the weight of the moment had shifted, he spoke again. "Come inside," he said. "I can give you something to eat." The little girl didn't move at first. She didn't look surprised. She didn't even hesitate. She just stared at him, as though weighing something in her mind. Finally, she stepped forward, holding the empty plate in both hands, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. And in that instant, Ethan realized that he wasn't just offering food. He was offering something far more important. He was offering a chance. The little girl, whose name Ethan would soon learn was Maya, stepped into the warmth of the grand mansion, clutching her empty plate tightly, as if it were something of incredible value. The sharp contrast between the cold, harsh world outside and the polished marble floors, the crystal chandeliers above, and the soft, plush furniture around her was almost too much for her to process. She had never been inside such a place before. Her small shoes clicked quietly against the floor as Ethan led her into the grand dining room. The rich aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted chicken filled the air, but Maya's gaze didn't linger on the food. She was still clutching the plate, her eyes wide as she scanned the vast space, feeling out of place. Ethan noticed this and gave her a gentle smile, hoping to ease her discomfort. "You don't have to stand there, Maya. Please, take a seat." He gestured toward the elegant dining table, its surface set for a formal meal, complete with fine china and polished silverware. Maya hesitated, her eyes darting to the table, then back to Ethan. I don't want to be a bother, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. Ethan was taken aback by the words. The way she said it, so calmly, so quietly, made it clear that she had never been in a place like this before, never been offered a seat at a table where people ate together. He could feel the weight of her past, the burdens of a life he couldn't even imagine. But he was determined to show her something different, something better. You're not a bother, Maya, he reassured her, his tone warm and inviting. You're welcome here. You're safe here. After a moment, Maya nodded slowly and took a seat at the table. Ethan motioned to the servants, who quickly brought a plate of food to her. As she looked at the meal, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a side of vegetables, her eyes widened, but she didn't immediately take a bite. Instead, she looked up at Ethan, her small face serious. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice full of suspicion. Ethan paused, the question catching him off guard. It wasn't something he had expected from a little girl, but then again, Maya wasn't just any little girl. She was someone who had been through things he could never understand. I'm helping because I can, he said, his voice steady but soft. And because I believe everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. You deserve kindness, Maya. She looked at him for a long moment, her small brow furrowed, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she picked up her fork and took a bite of the chicken. The moment she did, Ethan saw something shift in her. It wasn't just the way she ate, savoring the food as if she had never tasted anything so good. It was the way her shoulders relaxed, the tension in her body easing. For the first time, Ethan realized that he wasn't just feeding a hungry child. He was offering her something far more significant, the chance to experience something she had likely never known, compassion without strings attached. The meal went on in silence, with Maya taking small, cautious bites. Ethan watched her, unsure of how to bridge the growing gap between them. He wanted to know more about her life, but he didn't want to push too hard. After a while, Maya looked up at him again, this time with a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. This is good, she said, her voice a little more relaxed than before. Thank you. Ethan smiled back, relieved to see her begin to open up. You're welcome, Maya. As the meal continued, Ethan couldn't help but think about what had brought her to this moment. He knew she was hiding something painful. He had seen it in her eyes the moment she stepped into his world, a world that must have seemed so foreign to her. But he also saw something else, something deeper. Maya wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was strong, resilient in ways that Ethan couldn't even begin to understand. He realized that this wasn't just about offering her a warm meal or a place to stay. This was about offering her a chance to be more than just a survivor. It was about giving her the chance to truly live. The thought lingered in his mind as the evening wore on. When the meal was finished, Ethan stood and offered his hand to Maya, helping her up from the table. Come on, let's get you settled. We can talk more later, if you'd like. Maya took his hand, her grip small but firm, and as they walked through the mansion together, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was unfolding, something that neither of them had expected. Ivan felt the weight of the evening settle around him as he led Maya upstairs. The house, once filled with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses, now felt empty, almost cold. The grandeur of it all, the towering walls, the thick carpets, the gleaming chandeliers, seemed so distant from the quiet girl walking beside him. She wasn't a child of luxury, and she never would be. Her world had been built on survival, not comfort, and Ivan couldn't help but wonder how long she had been navigating life without anything resembling warmth. As they walked down the hallway, Maya's small hand still held tightly to the empty plate she had carried into his home. She didn't speak, her eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Ivan could see the quiet war inside her, the reluctance to accept kindness, the uncertainty of whether she even deserved it. You're safe here, Ivan said quietly, as much to reassure himself as her. He opened a door to a guest room, and Maya stepped in slowly, looking around. The soft, plush bed was covered with a quilt in a shade of blue she had never seen before. The room was far more lavish than anything she had known, but it didn't overwhelm her. It felt, simple in a way, warm. As she stood in the middle of the room, Ivan saw her glance back at him, still clutching that empty plate. You can put it down, you know, he said with a gentle smile. There's nothing on it, but you're still carrying it. She looked at the plate, then at him, and for the briefest moment, Ivan saw the flicker of a smile. A small, tentative smile that made his heart tighten. She placed the plate down on the nightstand, finally letting go of the past she had been carrying with her. Ivan turned to leave, but Maya's voice stopped him. "Why did you help me?" she asked, her voice soft and uncertain, like she wasn't sure if she wanted the answer. Ivan paused, his back still turned to her. He had expected the question, he just hadn't expected to feel the weight of it as much as he did. "Because everyone deserves a chance," he said, his voice steady, but with an undercurrent of something deeper, something he couldn't fully explain. He didn't know why he had felt this immediate pull toward her, why her silent strength and quiet resilience had affected him so much. But it wasn't just about helping her for a night. It was about something bigger, something about offering her the kind of life she had been denied. Maya didn't respond, but he could see the wheels turning in her head. She was processing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. For the first time in her life, she had been offered something real. The door clicked softly as Ivan left, and Maya stood still, her mind racing. She didn't know how long she stood there, just staring at the bed. It looked comfortable, too comfortable. She hadn't felt comfort in so long. Not the kind that lasted, not the kind that made you believe you were allowed to rest. She took a tentative step toward the bed, then another, and slowly, she crawled into it. The sheets were soft and smelled faintly of lavender. It was so different from the cold, dusty corners she had grown used to. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt her body begin to relax. But her mind was still running, still tangled in thoughts of the world outside this room. Would this last? Would she be safe here? Or was this just another fleeting moment in a life that had taught her never to trust anything good? Ivan's footsteps echoed down the hallway as he left her alone in the room, but Maya didn't notice. She was lost in the quiet. The silence felt different here. There was no shouting, no fear, no cold air biting at her skin. It was just quiet, and somehow that was enough. She curled up on the bed, tucking herself under the covers, feeling a strange warmth spread through her. It wasn't the warmth of a fire or a meal, but something deeper, something she hadn't realized she had been missing for so long. As she drifted into sleep, her thoughts were no longer filled with the anxiety of survival. Instead, there was something else, something unfamiliar. Hope. Ivan stood in the hallway outside her room, his hand resting on the door frame. He had done the right thing, hadn't he? He had brought her into his home, given her food, given her shelter. But there was something more to this, something he couldn't put into words. He had never expected a moment like this. To be sitting in his grand mansion, his mind consumed not by the world he had built for himself, but by a little girl who had nothing. But that was exactly why he couldn't stop thinking about her. Maya. Her quiet strength had cracked something inside him. And as he turned to walk away, his heart told him he would never be the same. Something inside him had shifted, and there was no going back. Ivan woke early the next morning, the quiet of the house settling over him like a heavy blanket. The sun had barely risen, casting a pale light through the windows as he walked down the hallway. He had spent the night thinking about Maya, about the way she had walked into his world, an innocent stranger, and yet, in so many ways, a reflection of his own hidden guilt. She had arrived with nothing but a plate, pretending to have a feast. It had made something inside him stir, something he had buried beneath years of business deals and power plays. He didn't know what it was, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he had a duty to this little girl. As he reached the kitchen, he saw Maya sitting at the table, her small hands wrapped around a mug of hot cocoa. She looked so out of place in the grand kitchen, her worn shoes resting awkwardly against the smooth tiles. Her clothes, though clean now, still bore the signs of a life lived in struggle. She looked up as Ivan walked in, her face expressionless, though her eyes were watchful. "Good morning," he said, his voice softer than usual. "How did you sleep?" Maya didn't answer right away. She took a long sip of the cocoa, her eyes still locked on the table. Ivan could see the hesitation in her, the wall she had built up to protect herself. He understood. He had lived behind walls of his own for years. "It was okay," Maya replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She shifted in her seat, her fingers playing with the edge of her mug. "Thank you for letting me stay." Ivan smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "You don't have to thank me, Maya. You're safe here." She didn't respond, and for a long moment, the only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. Ivan watched her, wondering what was going through her mind. She was so quiet, so guarded. He could see the weight of her past in every movement, in every word she didn't say. "I'm going to the office today," Ivan said, breaking the silence. "You don't have to stay here alone if you don't want to. You can go outside," or Maya's head snapped up, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "I can't leave," she said quickly, her voice shaking slightly. Ivan frowned, unsure of what she meant. "Why not?" he asked gently. Maya hesitated again, her eyes dropping back to the mug in her hands. "I don't want to get in trouble," she muttered. "People don't like me being outside." Ivan's heart sank as he realized the extent of what she was saying. She was afraid, not of him, but of the world. The same world that had hurt her, that had rejected her, had caused her to hide behind walls that no one could see. He felt a rush of guilt, a wave of sympathy he couldn't shake. "Maya," he said, kneeling down beside her. "You don't have to worry about that here. You're not going to get in trouble. You're safe." She didn't look up, but he could see the slight tremor in her hands. "It's okay," he said, trying to comfort her. "We can go slow. You can do whatever you feel comfortable with." Maya finally looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face, as if trying to find any sign of insincerity. She must have found none, because after a long moment, she nodded. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll stay here." Ivan smiled, giving her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before he stood up. He had hoped this moment would come, that he could offer her the peace and comfort she deserved. But deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The world outside was still harsh, still full of threats, and Maya wasn't ready to face it just yet. She had been through too much. The rest of the day passed quietly. Ivan worked in his study, handling calls and emails, though his thoughts kept drifting back to Maya. He couldn't stop thinking about the way she had clutched the empty plate the night before, as if it were the most precious thing she had. The image stayed with him, haunting him, and it only deepened his resolve to help her. He had to help her. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ivan returned home to find Maya sitting by the window, staring out at the world beyond. She hadn't moved much throughout the day, just sitting in the same spot, watching life pass by. "Maya," Ivan called gently, stepping into the room. She turned toward him, her expression soft but distant. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her eyes seemed far away. "I'm fine," she said, but Ivan could tell she wasn't. There was something else in her eyes, a quiet sadness, a weariness that no child should carry. He took a deep breath, knowing that this was just the beginning of something far bigger than either of them had expected. They were both facing a future they couldn't yet see. But Ivan knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let Maya face it alone. Not anymore. Ivan had always been a man of routine. His days were measured in meetings, calls, and the constant hum of business. Yet, something about the past few days had started to unsettle him. Maya had become a quiet presence in his life, and with every passing moment, the weight of her silence seemed to grow heavier. It wasn't just her presence that had affected him. It was the way she had begun to change the atmosphere of his home. The house felt less like a place of solitude and more like a home, and the more Ivan tried to ignore the shift, the more he realized it was impossible to go back to the way things were before. That evening, after a long day spent at his office, Ivan returned home, his mind still spinning with thoughts of Maya. When he stepped through the door, he was surprised to find her sitting at the kitchen table, a piece of paper in front of her, a pencil clutched tightly in her hand. The faint glow of the kitchen lights illuminated her small figure, and the sight of her so absorbed in whatever she was doing made something in Ivan's chest tighten. "Hey, Maya," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, startled, before her face relaxed into a quiet smile. "Hi," she said, her voice a little unsure. Ivan stepped closer, glancing at the paper. It was a simple drawing, a crayon sketch of what appeared to be a house. There was a small window, a door, and a tree, though the tree was a bit crooked. "What's this?" he asked, nodding toward the drawing. Maya hesitated for a moment before speaking. It's a house, like the one I want." Her words were simple, but the vulnerability behind them struck Ivan harder than he expected. He hadn't realized until that moment how much she had been holding back. She had a dream, a quiet hope, something beyond just surviving. "That's a nice house," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Is it the kind of house you'd want to live in?" Maya nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes that he couldn't ignore. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I've never lived in one like that." Ivan sat down across from her, looking at the drawing. He didn't speak right away, unsure of how to address the heavy silence that had settled between them. Instead, he simply looked at her, this small, resilient child who had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders for far too long. He felt the pull in his chest again, the instinct to help, to offer something more than just food or shelter. It was something deeper, something he couldn't quite put into words. "Maya," he said after a while, his voice calm and steady. "You can have a house like this, and you can live in it, if you want." Maya looked up at him, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't quite understand what he was saying. "You mean here?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Ivan nodded. "Not just here. Anywhere you want. We'll figure it out. I'll make sure you have a place where you're safe, where you can be happy, if that's what you want." Maya stared at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" Ivan blinked, surprised by the question. It was simple, but it carried so much weight. "Why what?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Why would you help me?" "People don't help me." The words hung in the air, and Ivan could see the layers of pain behind them. She had been hurt by the world, by the very people who were supposed to protect her, and somewhere along the way, she had stopped expecting anything good to come her way. It broke Ivan's heart to think of how much she had endured. "Because you deserve it," he said softly. "Because you're a person, and everyone deserves a chance." Maya didn't respond right away. Instead, she turned her gaze back to the drawing. The silence stretched out between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like a moment of understanding, an unspoken connection. Maya was trying to understand what Ivan was offering, and he was willing to give her the time she needed to process it. "I don't know how to trust," Maya said, her voice barely audible. Ivan nodded, understanding. "It's okay. You don't have to trust me right away. I'm not asking you to, but I am asking you to let me help you. And I'll do it, no strings attached. You don't have to do anything. Just be you." For the first time since she had entered his home, Maya's shoulders relaxed. She didn't smile, not yet, but something in her eyes softened. The walls she had built around herself were still there, but Ivan could see the cracks beginning to form. The beginning of something new. He stood up from the table, glancing over at Maya one last time. "I'm going to get some rest," he said. "But if you need anything, just let me know." Maya nodded, and as Ivan left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between them. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust would take time. But for the first time, Ivan believed it was possible. And so did Maya. Ivan spent the next few days reflecting on the growing bond between him and Maya. It was subtle at first, like the soft rustling of leaves in a breeze, but it was undeniable. She had begun to let down her guard, even if only a little. There were moments, small, quiet moments, when she would look at him with a glimmer of trust in her eyes. That trust, however fragile, made Ivan feel something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. Maya's presence in his life had started to fill a gap he hadn't realized was there. But as much as things were slowly improving, Ivan knew that there was still so much more to be done. Maya's past was not something that could be erased with a warm meal or a safe place to stay. It was something that had been carved into her very being, something she carried with her like an invisible weight. Ivan had to remind himself that helping her wasn't just about providing material things. It was about showing her that kindness was possible, that love didn't come with strings attached, and that she was worthy of both. One afternoon, as Ivan walked through the sprawling garden of his estate, he saw Maya sitting by the small pond near the back. She was staring into the water, her small hands folded in her lap. There was something peaceful about the way she sat, something almost meditative. Ivan hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her without intruding on her thoughts. But then he walked over, taking a seat beside her on the stone bench. She didn't look up when he sat down, but Ivan could tell she was aware of his presence. For a while, they sat in silence, the only sounds being the rustling of leaves in the wind and the soft crooning of birds in the distance. Finally, Maya spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "Do you ever think about how things could have been different?" Ivan looked at her, surprised by the question. It was the first time she had spoken so openly, so vulnerably. "Different?" he asked, his tone gentle. She nodded, her gaze still fixed on the water. If I hadn't been the way I am. If I hadn't been left behind. Ivan's heart tightened at her words, but he kept his voice calm. Maya, he said softly. You are not what happened to you. You are not the things that were done to you. She turned her head toward him then, her dark eyes searching his face. But it's all I've ever known, she said, her voice breaking just slightly. How do you stop being what they made you? Ivan didn't have an immediate answer. What could he say? That it was easy to heal, that time would make everything better? He knew better than that. Healing was hard, slow, and painful, but it was possible. He took a deep breath and reached over, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. You start by believing that you can be more, he said quietly. You start by letting yourself believe that you're worthy of more than what they gave you. Maya's eyes flickered, her shoulders tense beneath his touch. For a moment, she said nothing, her face unreadable. But then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Ivan smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. You are so much more than you realize, he said softly. You have the power to choose your future, Maya. No one can take that from you. Maya's lips trembled for a moment, and she looked away, her gaze drifting. Back to the pond. Ivan didn't press her further, instead allowing her the space to process the words. He knew this was a long road. She wouldn't change overnight. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he was here now. He had promised her safety, and he would keep that promise. The silence stretched between them again, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the heavy, uncomfortable silence of the past. It was a peaceful, contemplative silence, one that seemed to carry a sense of hope. Ivan leaned back on the bench, his eyes drifting to the sky. The sun was beginning to dip low on the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over the garden. For the first time in a long time, Ivan allowed himself to believe that things could change. Things could get better. Maya didn't speak again that afternoon, but she didn't need to. Her quiet presence beside him, the gentle way she had listened, was enough. As the evening drew near, Ivan stood and offered his hand to Maya. Come on, he said, his voice light. Let's get some dinner. I think you'll like what the chef made tonight. Maya looked up at him, her face softening as she took his hand. She didn't say anything, but her fingers wrapped around his with a quiet, trusting grip. And for the first time in a long time, Ivan felt something he hadn't known he was missing. He felt like he was doing something good, something right. Together, they walked back toward the house, the sun setting behind them. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, it felt full of possibility. Ivan didn't expect the call that came a week later. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, but there was an undercurrent of tension. Mr. Caldwell, this is Detective Hayes from the local precinct. We need to talk about Maya. Ivan's heart skipped a beat. What about her? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. She's fine for now, but we've come across some information that may concern you. Ivan's stomach tightened. What kind of information? We've learned that Maya's mother was involved in a rather dangerous situation. And it seems that Maya might be connected to a bigger issue than just her past living conditions. Ivan felt a coldness creep over him. What are you saying? Is Maya in danger? We don't know yet, the detective said. But it would be a good idea to bring her in for questioning. We need to understand what she might know. Ivan didn't hesitate. I'll bring her in. Let me know when and where. The call ended, and Ivan stood there for a moment, staring at the phone in his hand. He had known something was off about Maya's past, but this was something entirely different. He couldn't shake the feeling that she had been running from something much bigger than just an absent mother and a difficult childhood. Maya deserved better than this. She deserved peace. Ivan couldn't let her face whatever this was alone. That evening, he called her into the living room after dinner. Maya had been quieter than usual that day, her mind seemingly preoccupied, though she hadn't said anything. She came into the room, her small figure looking a bit lost against the vast space of the mansion. She stood by the doorway, her eyes hesitant, as if unsure of why she had been summoned. Ivan sat on the couch and gestured for her to sit beside him. Maya, he said gently, there's something we need to talk about. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she came over and sat down beside him. She didn't speak, just waited for him to continue. There's a situation, Ivan said slowly, choosing his words carefully. A detective called today. They need to talk to you about your mother. It seems there are some things in her past that might be important for us to understand. Maya stiffened beside him, her hands clenching in her lap. Ivan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her body went rigid at the mention of her mother. "What do they want?" she asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ivan's heart ached for her. "They just want to talk to you, Maya. It's nothing you need to be afraid of. They just need to know what you know. You don't have to say anything you don't want to." Maya didn't answer at first. She stared at the floor, her small hands fiddling with the hem of her sleeve. Ivan waited, giving her the space she needed. After a long silence, she spoke. "I don't want to go back to that place," she said softly. Ivan felt a pang of understanding. He knew what she meant. Her past had been filled with uncertainty, pain, and loss. She had only recently found safety here with him, and the idea of returning to a world filled with questions and fears must have felt like a step backward. Ivan put a hand on her shoulder, gently squeezing. "You don't have to go back, Maya. You're safe here. I'll be with you every step of the way." She looked up at him then, her dark eyes full of a mix of fear and something else, hope. "Will you come with me?" she asked. Her voice was small, but the question was clear. Ivan didn't hesitate. "Of course. I'll be there." Maya nodded slowly, as if the reassurance had made it a little easier for her to breathe. The next day, Ivan and Maya made their way to the precinct. As they arrived, Ivan noticed the stark difference between the warmth of his home and the cold, sterile feel of the police station. Maya seemed even smaller in this unfamiliar setting, clutching Ivan's hand tightly as they walked into the building. Detective Hayes greeted them in a small, quiet room. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, and the only light came from a flickering overhead bulb. It was nothing like the safety Maya had come to know. Ivan sat beside her, his presence a silent promise that she wouldn't have to face this alone. Detective Hayes didn't waste time. He began asking questions, but Maya didn't respond immediately. Ivan could see her face turning pale, her eyes darting around the room. She was uncomfortable, her body tense, but she wasn't backing away. Ivan gave her a reassuring smile, hoping it would ground her. After a long moment, Maya spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know much," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't remember everything." Detective Hayes nodded, not pushing her further. "That's okay, Maya. We just need to understand what your mother was involved in and how it might affect you." Maya looked down at her hands, her shoulders trembling slightly. "She always told me to stay out of trouble, to keep my head down." Ivan's heart clenched at her words. "And I did. I stayed quiet. I didn't ask questions." Detective Hayes looked at Ivan, then back at Maya. "You did the right thing by staying safe, Maya. But sometimes, the truth comes out whether we want it to or not." Maya nodded, but Ivan could see the fear in her eyes. "You don't have to do this alone," Ivan said softly, his voice filled with reassurance. "I'm here with you always." For the first time that day, Maya seemed to relax slightly. She looked up at Ivan, her small face filled with gratitude. She didn't say anything more, but her silent trust spoke volumes. As they left the precinct, the weight of the day seemed to lift just a little. Maya hadn't been able to give them all the answers they were looking for, but she had taken a step. She had trusted Ivan enough to be open with him, and that was a start. Ivan couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They still had a long road ahead, but with every step, Maya was learning that the past didn't define her future. And for the first time, Ivan felt like he was finally doing something right. Ivan felt the weight of the phone call the next morning. Maya hadn't yet come down for breakfast, and he knew she was still processing everything from yesterday. The detective's office had been more unsettling than either of them had anticipated. Maya had answered the questions as best she could, but Ivan could see the toll it had taken on her. She had always been guarded, but now, she seemed even more withdrawn, as if the walls she'd built around herself had grown taller overnight. Ivan sat in his office, the phone still in his hand. It wasn't like him to be this distracted, especially when there were so many things demanding his attention, but Maya's situation was more than just a case. It was personal. He hadn't expected to feel so deeply for her, but now he couldn't stop thinking about her, about what she had endured, and about how he could make her feel safe in a world that had never shown her kindness. The phone call was from Detective Hayes. "Mr. Caldwell," the detective said, his voice a little heavier than usual. "We've hit a bit of a roadblock. Maya's mother, she was involved with some dangerous people. We've tracked down some of her associates, and we're getting closer, but there are still gaps in the story. We need to Know everything Maya remembers. Ivan didn't have to hear anymore. He knew what was coming. Detective, I'm not pushing Maya anymore. She's been through enough. If you need anything, let me know, but I'm not going to force her into something she's not ready for. The detective sighed on the other end of the line. I understand, Mr. Caldwell. But this is bigger than we thought. We can't protect her from this forever. The words hung in the air, cold and final. Ivan's heart sank. Maya had already been through so much, and now it seemed like the past was closing in on her, threatening to pull her back into a life she had barely survived. He ended the call and sat in silence for a few moments, trying to gather his thoughts. He knew there was more to Maya's story, more than even she understood, and that understanding seemed to be slipping through their fingers. But he had made a promise to her. He wouldn't let her go back to that life. He couldn't. Ivan left his office and made his way downstairs to the kitchen. Maya was sitting at the table, a half-eaten bowl of cereal in front of her. She looked up as he walked in, but her eyes quickly dropped back to her bowl. She hadn't been herself all morning, distant, her thoughts clearly elsewhere. Ivan pulled out a chair and sat down beside her. Maya, he said softly, keeping his voice steady. I know things are difficult right now, but I need you to know something. Whatever happens, you're not alone. I'm here with you. Maya didn't respond immediately, but after a long moment, she looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and uncertainty. I know, she said quietly, but it feels like everything is falling apart. Ivan felt a pang of guilt at her words. She was right. The weight of the situation was overwhelming, but he had to stay strong for her. I know it's scary, he said, his voice gentle, but we'll figure this out together. We'll take it one step at a time. You don't have to face this alone. Maya stared at him for a long time, and Ivan could see the battle inside her. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that things could get better, but the walls she had built around herself were strong. Ivan didn't know how to break through them, but he wouldn't give up. Do you think things will ever be normal? Maya asked, her voice so quiet that Ivan had to lean in to hear her. Do you think I'll ever have a life that's not broken? Ivan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. I think you can have whatever kind of life you want, Maya. It won't be easy, and it won't happen overnight, but it's possible. You're stronger than you realize. Maya looked away, her gaze drifting out the window. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she whispered. Ivan's heart broke at the sound of her words. Maya, he said, his voice firm but kind, you don't have to do this alone. And you don't have to be perfect. You just have to take one step forward. I'll be right beside you, every step of the way. For a long moment, Maya said nothing, her hands still resting on the table, her fingers twitching slightly. Ivan wasn't sure if she heard him or if she was even listening. But then, slowly, she lifted her head, and for the first time in days, she met his eyes. There was something new in her gaze, something that resembled trust. Okay, she said softly. One step at a time. Ivan felt a weight lift from his chest. She wasn't ready to let go of everything just yet, but she was willing to try. And that was all he needed to know. Together, they would face whatever came next. The world outside might still be full of danger and uncertainty, but for the first time in a long while, Ivan believed they could find a way through it. Together, Ivan stood in the grand foyer of the mansion, staring at the door before him. It had been a week since their conversation in the kitchen, since Maya had agreed to take things one step at a time, and though there had been progress, Ivan could still feel the weight of the unspoken things between them. There was still so much about her past that she hadn't shared, so much that she was holding back, and Ivan wasn't sure how to help her carry it. They had come so far in such a short time, and yet, the distance between the two of them seemed to stretch endlessly. Maya had become a constant presence in his life, but he couldn't help feeling like he was just scratching the surface. He wanted to know everything about her, to offer her the kind of support that would give her the future she deserved, but he knew that it would take time. She had to trust him first, and that trust was something he had to earn, not just ask for. As he stood there, lost in his thoughts, he heard footsteps behind him. Maya appeared in the doorway, her expression hesitant but determined. She had been quiet lately, lost in her own thoughts, but there was something different in her eyes today, something that made Ivan feel like they were finally making progress. Can we talk? She asked, her voice soft but steady. Ivan turned to face her, nodding slowly. Of course, he said, his voice gentle. What's on your mind? Maya hesitated for a moment, looking down at her hands before looking up at him again. I've been thinking, she said slowly, about what you said. About taking one step at a time. Ivan's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure where this conversation would lead, but he could sense that it was important. And, he asked, his voice low and encouraging. I think I'm ready to take the next step, Maya said, her voice a little stronger now. I don't know if I can trust everything, but I can try. Ivan felt a surge of pride. It wasn't much, but it was everything. She was opening up, just a little, and that was a huge step for her. That's all I'm asking, Maya, Ivan said, his voice full of warmth. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to try. Maya nodded, though she still looked unsure. There's something I need to tell you, she said, her voice faltering slightly. Ivan's chest tightened. What is it? He asked softly, stepping closer to her. Maya took a deep breath, her eyes searching his face for something, though he couldn't tell what. It's about my mom, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know everything, but I know she was involved with some bad people. People who hurt people. Ivan felt his stomach drop. He had suspected as much, but hearing her say it out loud made the truth hit him like a punch to the gut. Maya had been running from something darker than he could imagine. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready, Ivan said quickly, wanting to give her an out. Maya shook her head, her expression determined. No, she said, her voice steady now. I need to tell you. I need you to understand. My mom wasn't always the person she seemed. She was afraid, and sometimes she did things she didn't want to do. But it wasn't just her. There were others, people who hurt her, people who, her voice trailed off, and for a moment, she looked away, lost in the memories that were clearly too painful to relive. Ivan reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Maya, he said softly, you don't have to carry this by yourself. I'm here. You don't have to do it alone. She looked up at him then, her eyes brimming with emotion. I don't know what to do with all of this, she whispered. I don't know how to let go of it. Ivan smiled gently, his voice filled with reassurance. You don't have to let go of it all at once, he said. It takes time, one step at a time, and I'm here to help you take those steps. Maya nodded, her lips trembling as if she was trying to hold back tears. Thank you, she whispered, though the words seemed too small for the depth of her gratitude. Ivan squeezed her shoulder gently, offering her the kind of quiet strength he knew she needed. We'll figure it out together, he said softly. Maya seemed to take comfort in his words, though the sadness in her eyes hadn't completely disappeared. It wasn't going to be easy, he knew that, but it was a start, and that was enough. As they stood there in the hallway, Ivan felt a shift between them, a deeper connection that went beyond words. Maya was still uncertain, still carrying the weight of her past, but now she had someone who would help her carry it. She didn't have to face it alone anymore. You ready to take that next step? Ivan asked softly. Maya looked up at him, a small but genuine smile playing at the corners of her lips. Yeah, she said quietly. I think I am. Ivan felt a rush of relief. The road ahead would be long, and there would be more challenges to face, but for the first time, Ivan felt hopeful. Maya had taken the first step toward healing, and with that, the possibility of a better future had become a little more real. Ivan had always thought of his home as a place of peace, a sanctuary away from the demands of his work, but over the last few weeks, it had transformed into something more, a place of growth, healing, and the beginning of something he couldn't yet define. Maya had settled into the mansion more than he had expected, her presence less of a disruption now and more of a quiet, steady force. She wasn't just adjusting to her new life, she was changing in ways he hadn't anticipated. She had begun asking questions about her future, about what she wanted, and slowly, she was allowing herself to dream. It was the first time he had seen this side of her, this version of Maya that wasn't afraid to reach for something more than just survival. And it made Ivan wonder how far she could go, how much she could accomplish if given the chance. Maya's progress wasn't immediate, but it was real. She had started to open up about more than just her past, her fears, her hopes, and even her dreams. And as she sat across from him at the kitchen table one evening, the evening light casting a warm glow over the room, Ivan could see the shift in her. Her eyes weren't filled with uncertainty or fear anymore. There was a quiet strength there, one that Ivan hadn't noticed before. I've been thinking about something, Maya said, her voice calm but firm. I want to go to school. I mean, really go to school. Ivan's heart swelled with pride, but but he didn't let it show. He nodded slowly, as if considering her words. You know, he said gently, you don't have to decide right away. But if you wanna, we can make it happen. Maya looked at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I know, she said softly, but I think I'm ready. I don't want to be afraid anymore. I want to do something with my life. I want to be more than just what happened to me. Ivan could feel the weight of her words, the deep conviction in her voice. This wasn't just a passing thought. This was her taking control, claiming a future that she had never dared to imagine before. And in that moment, Ivan knew that this wasn't just about helping Maya succeed in school. It was about helping her believe that she deserved to succeed, that she was worthy of a future beyond the darkness of her past. I'm proud of you, Maya, Ivan said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. You've come so far. Maya didn't reply right away. She simply sat there, her fingers tapping gently on the edge of her mug, as if lost in thought. Ivan let the silence stretch, giving her the time she needed to process everything. He understood that her journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, but Maya had proven time and time again that she had the strength to face them. Finally, Maya spoke again, her voice softer now. I don't want to fail. I don't want to let anyone down. I don't want to disappoint you. Ivan reached across the table, placing his hand gently over hers. Maya, you don't have to worry about that. You're not doing this for me. You're doing this for you. And no matter what happens, I'll always be proud of you. Just take it one step at a time. She looked up at him then, her eyes shining with something new. Hope. Maybe, or maybe something even more powerful. Belief. Belief in herself. And that was something Ivan hadn't seen in her before. It made him believe in her too, in a way he hadn't expected. Over the next few days, Maya's focus shifted. She started working on her school assignments, even though she wasn't technically enrolled yet. Ivan had hired a tutor, someone patient and kind who understood the challenges Maya faced. It wasn't the traditional classroom setting, but for now, it was enough. It was the first step toward her dream. The day Maya enrolled in school was an emotional one. Ivan accompanied her to the office, waiting with her as she filled out the paperwork. She was nervous, her hands trembling as she signed her name, but there was a determination in her eyes that made Ivan smile. As they left the office, Maya seemed a little lighter, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Ivan knew this was just the beginning. There would be struggles ahead. She would face the challenges of fitting in, of navigating a world that had never made room for her. But she was no longer that frightened little girl who clung to an empty plate. She was a girl who had begun to imagine a future. And for the first time, she believed she could have one. As they walked back to the car, Ivan couldn't help but glance over at Maya. She looked up at him then, a small but genuine smile on her face. Thank you, she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. Ivan smiled back, his heart swelling with pride. You did it, Maya, he said. You're doing it. And I couldn't be prouder. Maya's smile grew a little wider, and Ivan knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. It felt like something she could conquer. And he would be there, every step of the way. Ivan sat in the quiet of his study, staring at the documents spread across his desk. It had been weeks since Maya enrolled in school, and while she was making progress, there were moments when the old fears crept back in. She was still adjusting to this new life, to the idea that she could trust someone, that she could have a future beyond her past. Ivan had seen glimpses of the strength she carried, but he also knew that the road ahead would be far from easy. Maya's past wasn't something she could outrun, and the shadows of it still lingered in her mind. She had only begun to process the trauma of her childhood, and there were days when the weight of it felt unbearable. He had made a promise to her, to be there, to support her, no matter what, but sometimes he wondered if he could really give her the healing she needed. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts, and Ivan looked up to see Maya, standing in the doorway, her expression uncertain. He could see the hesitation in her eyes, but she had come to him, which was progress in itself. Can we talk? She asked, her voice quiet but steady. Ivan nodded, motioning for her to come in. He gestured to the chair across from him, and Maya slowly sat down, her fingers tapping nervously on her knee. What's on your mind? Ivan asked gently, trying to ease the tension between them. Maya hesitated for a moment before speaking. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, her voice soft. About how I'm not what happened to me. Ivan's heart clenched at the words. He had said them to reassure her, to help her see herself differently, but hearing her say them now made it feel like the weight of her past was catching up with her. And, he asked, his voice gentle. Maya looked up at him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of vulnerability and determination. I think I'm starting to believe you, she said quietly. But there's something I need to ask you. Ivan leaned forward, sensing the gravity of her words. What is it? What if I can't do it? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I can't move past all the things that happened to me? Ivan felt his chest tighten. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when Maya confronted her fear head-on. He reached across the desk, gently placing his hand over hers. Maya, you don't have to do it alone, he said softly. You don't have to move past everything at once. It's okay to take your time. What matters is that you're trying, and that's enough. You're enough. Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She simply sat there, absorbing his words, her breath shallow as if she were afraid to let herself believe them. Ivan could see the walls she had built around herself, walls that had protected her for so long, walls she was only now starting to let down. I don't know how to be normal, Maya whispered. I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm broken. Ivan squeezed her hand gently, his heart aching for her. You're not broken, Maya. You're just learning to heal. And healing takes time. But you're doing it, little by little. You're not broken. You're just still growing. Maya looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for any sign of doubt. Finding none, she nodded slowly. I want to believe that, she said, her voice trembling. Ivan smiled, a warm, reassuring smile. Then believe it, he said. You're not just surviving anymore, Maya. You're living. And that's the first step, the hardest step. For a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air between them. Ivan could see the struggle in her, the way she was fighting herself, but he could also see something else, the faintest glimmer of hope. And that glimmer was enough. I don't know what's going to happen, Maya said finally, breaking the silence. But I want to try. I want to see what's out there. Ivan's heart swelled with pride. He had seen her face so many challenges before, but this was different. This was her choosing to move forward, to face the unknown. That's all anyone can ask for, he said softly. One step at a time. That's how we get through this. Maya nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Ivan could see the change in her, the way she was beginning to believe in herself. It was subtle, but it was there. And that was the most important thing. You don't have to do it alone, Ivan added, his voice filled with quiet conviction. You have me, and I'm not going anywhere. Maya's smile grew a little wider, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Ivan saw a flicker of peace in her eyes. She was still a long way from healing, still carrying the weight of her past, but she had made the most important choice. She had chosen to fight for her future. And with that, Ivan knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. That evening, as they sat together in the quiet of the living room, Maya leaned her head against Ivan's shoulder. She didn't say anything, but the simple act of leaning on him spoke volumes. Ivan put his arm around her, feeling the warmth of her presence beside him. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know what the future held. But in that moment, Ivan knew one thing for sure. They were ready to face whatever came next, together. Ivan woke up early the next morning, the soft rays of the sun slipping through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the room. He had always found mornings to be a time for reflection, and today was no different. Maya had made incredible progress in the past few weeks. She was starting to believe in herself, starting to see a future for herself. But Ivan knew that the hardest part was still ahead of them. Maya's past still hung over her, and no matter how much progress she made, there would be days when the shadows of her past would creep in. He couldn't protect her from those moments, but he could help her navigate them. That was what he had promised. As he sat in his office, his thoughts kept drifting to Maya. She had been quieter lately, more withdrawn. He wasn't sure if it was because of school or something else. He had tried to give her space, but he couldn't help but worry. She had been through so much, and sometimes he wasn't sure if she truly felt safe, even here. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a text from Maya. Can we talk? I need to tell you something. Ivan's heart skipped a beat. The tone of the message felt serious, and he immediately stood up, grabbing his jacket. He had been waiting for a conversation like this, but he wasn't sure if he was ready. He made his way to the living room where Maya was sitting on the couch, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look up when he entered, her eyes fixed on the floor. Ivan sat down beside her, not saying anything at first. He knew she needed time to find the words. After a few moments of silence, Maya finally spoke. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice soft but steady. "About everything. About what you said. About the future. I don't know if I'm ready to leave my past behind. I don't know if I can ever really let go of it." Ivan felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had known this day would come, the day when the weight of her past would come crashing down on her. But hearing her say it out loud made it all the more real. He looked at her, his voice gentle but firm. "Maya, you don't have to let go of everything at once. You don't have to forget what happened to you, but you don't have to let it define you either. You can be more than just your past, and you don't have to do it alone." Maya looked up at him then, her eyes filled with doubt and pain. "I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm broken," she whispered. Ivan's heart broke at her words. He reached out and placed a hand gently on her shoulder, giving her a moment to steady herself. "Maya, you're not broken," he said softly. "You're healing, and healing takes time. It's not about forgetting or pretending that things didn't happen. It's about choosing to move forward, even when it's hard." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just sat there, her hands trembling in her lap. Ivan could see the internal battle she was fighting. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she could move beyond her past. But the weight of everything she had experienced was too much to bear alone. "You don't have to figure it all out today," Ivan continued. "But you're here. You're trying. That's what matters." Maya took a deep breath, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at Ivan, her gaze steady, though still filled with uncertainty. "I don't know if I'll ever be okay," she said quietly. "But I want to try. I want to know what it feels like to be free." Ivan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "That's all anyone can ask for. Just take it one step at a time. We'll face this together." Maya nodded, a small but genuine smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. For the first time in a long while, Ivan saw a glimpse of the girl he had always known she could be. She was still fragile, still carrying the weight of her past, but she was learning to trust again. She was learning to believe in herself. And that, more than anything, gave Ivan hope for the future. As the days passed, Maya's progress continued. She was still nervous, still uncertain at times, but she was starting to take the steps she needed to heal. She was opening up more, sharing the things she had been holding on to for so long. There were still moments when the fear and doubt crept in, when the shadows of her past threatened to swallow her whole, but each time, she fought back. Ivan watched her with a sense of awe, knowing that she was capable of so much more than she realized. But it wasn't just Maya who was changing. Ivan had begun to realize that his own life had been stuck in a cycle of work and routine, always focusing on the next big deal, the next big success. But now, with Maya in his life, he was starting to see things differently. He was learning the value of patience, of listening, of giving without expecting anything in return. He had spent so much of his life building walls to protect himself from the world, but now, with Maya, he was learning to tear them down. Together, they were building something new, something neither of them had ever expected. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time in years, Ivan felt like he was truly living. Maya had become more than just a part of his life. She had become his reason for hope. They weren't done yet. There were still challenges ahead, and there would be days when it felt like they were back at square one. But Ivan knew that they had come too far to turn back. Maya had chosen to move forward, and he would be right beside her every step of the way. Ivan sat in the living room, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest of the chair. The evening was quiet, the only sounds being the occasional rustle of the trees outside in the gentle wind. Maya had gone to bed early tonight, a slight change in her routine that Ivan couldn't quite place. He'd noticed the shift in her demeanor over the past few days, something heavier in her eyes, a distance that hadn't been there before. He wasn't sure what had caused it, but it concerned him. For weeks now, Maya had been doing well, settling into school, opening up little by little. But recently, there had been moments of quiet withdrawal, of silence that stretched for too long. Ivan had always prided himself on being able to read people, but Maya was a puzzle, one he was determined to solve, not for his sake, but for hers. She had come so far. He couldn't let her slip back into the shadows of her past. It wasn't long before he heard her footsteps, soft against the polished floors, as she entered the room. She didn't look at him immediately, her gaze fixed on the floor as she walked past him to the window. The setting sun cast a soft glow, but there was something about the way Maya stood there, her shoulders hunched, her posture stiff, that made Ivan's heart clench. "Maya?" Ivan asked, his voice quiet, careful not to push too hard. She didn't answer right away. She just kept staring out the window, her eyes distant, lost in some thought he couldn't reach. "Maya?" he repeated, this time a little more firmly. She turned slowly, her face a mixture of exhaustion and something else, something unspoken. She met his gaze, but there was an unreadable sadness in her eyes. "I'm not sure I can do this anymore," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. Ivan's stomach tightened. He stood up from the chair, walking over to her. He wasn't sure what she meant by it, but the words hung in the air like a heavy fog. "What do you mean, Maya?" he asked gently, his voice calm but filled with concern. Maya took a deep breath, her hands clasped together in front of her as if holding something fragile. "I've been thinking about everything. About the future, about school, about how things are going. And I don't know if I can handle it all." She paused, her lips trembling. "I feel like I'm falling behind. Like I'll never catch up. And every time I try to push myself, it's like I can't breathe." Ivan's heart sank. This was the fear he had been waiting for. The fear that Maya would hit a wall she couldn't get past, that all the progress she'd made would come crashing down on her. He walked over to her, standing just behind her as she looked out the window. "Maya," he said softly, his voice steady. "I know this is hard. I know it feels like everything is too much. But you're not alone in this. You're never alone." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with frustration and fear. "But what if I can't do it? What if I'm not strong enough?" Ivan stepped closer, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Maya, strength isn't about never feeling weak. It's about pushing through the times when you feel like you can't go on. It's about standing up, even when it feels impossible. And I'm here. I'm with you, every step of the way." Maya's chest rose and fell with a shaky breath. She wasn't convinced. Ivan could see it in her eyes. She was still fighting herself, still unsure if she could trust the future. He didn't have all the answers. He couldn't fix everything, but he could stand beside her. "You've made it this far, Maya," Ivan continued. "You've already proven that you're stronger than you think. You've survived more than most people could even imagine. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to take it one day at a time." Maya stayed silent for a long time, and Ivan didn't push her. He knew she needed time to process, to find the courage to believe in herself again. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, Ivan. I'm scared that I'll fail, that I'll disappoint you, that I'll let you down." Ivan's heart ached at her words, but he refused to let her feel that way. He wanted her to know that she didn't have to live up to any expectations other than her own. "Maya, I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to push you to be anything other than who you are. You don't have to prove anything to me." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face as if looking for any sign of doubt. Finding none, she took a small step forward. "I want to try," she said, her voice steady, though her eyes still reflected uncertainty. "But I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if I'm strong enough to keep going." Ivan smiled softly, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "You don't have to be ready all at once. You're doing just fine. The fact that you're even thinking about this, that you're here asking for help, shows me just how strong you are." Maya's lips trembled as she looked up at him, and for the first time in weeks, Ivan saw a tear slip down her cheek. But it wasn't a tear of defeat, it was a tear of release, a tear of healing. Ivan reached up, wiping the tear gently from her cheek. "It's okay," he said quietly. "You don't have to have it all figured out. You're still growing, and that's all that matters." Maya nodded slowly, her breath shaking as she wiped away the rest of her tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Ivan pulled her into a gentle hug, holding her tightly. "You're not alone," he said softly. "You'll never be alone. We'll figure this out together." As they stood there, wrapped in the warmth of the moment, Ivan knew that the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, but he also knew that Maya was stronger than she realized. And with time, she would learn to see that too. Ivan sat quietly in the library, a soft light coming in through the windows as he turned the pages of a book, though he hadn't really been reading. His mind kept drifting back to Maya. The conversation they had shared the night before had left him unsettled. She was so full of doubt, so hesitant about moving forward. And though he had reassured her that it was okay to take things one step at a time, a part of him couldn't shake the fear that she might still be holding back, afraid to fully trust the future. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of progress, but also moments of fear and uncertainty. Maya had taken huge steps forward, but each one seemed to be followed by a retreat into the safety of her past. Ivan had always known that her journey would be a long one. No one healed overnight. But watching her struggle with the weight of her past, with the doubts that still clouded her future, made him feel helpless in a way he wasn't used to. He had spent years building an empire, facing challenges head-on with logic and determination. But this, helping Maya navigate the trauma of her past, helping her find a way to trust again, this was something he couldn't control. There was no clear path, no easy fix. He couldn't make her believe in herself. All he could do was be there, offering her a safe space, a steady hand. But lately, even that didn't feel like enough. He was pulled out of his thoughts by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. He looked up to see Maya, standing in the doorway of the library, her eyes downcast. She hadn't come in to ask about anything, nor had she asked to talk. She simply stood there, her shoulders tense, her body language closed off. Ivan set the book down and motioned for her to come in. "Maya," he said. Softly, his voice warm, "Come sit." "You okay?" Maya hesitated for a moment before she walked slowly into the room. She took a seat across from Ivan, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. Ivan noticed the way her body was still, almost too still, like she was holding herself back. The tension between them was palpable, and it felt like there was something she wasn't saying. "Maya," Ivan said gently, his voice calm. "What's going on?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes flickered briefly to him, but then she turned her gaze to the floor. For a moment, Ivan wondered if she would open up at all. He had learned over the past few weeks that Maya wasn't quick to share, that she held her thoughts and feelings close, often masking them with silence. But Ivan knew this silence too well. It wasn't the silence of peace or contentment. It was the silence of someone who was fighting an internal battle. Finally, Maya spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to keep going." The words hit Ivan harder than he had expected. The last thing he had wanted was for her to feel like she was losing the fight, especially after everything she had accomplished so far. He leaned forward, his heart tightening as he spoke. "Maya," he said softly, "you don't have to keep going alone. I'm here. You don't have to face all of this by yourself." She looked up at him then, her eyes full of fear and uncertainty. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "I feel like I'm stuck in the past. Like no matter what I do, it's never going to be enough. I'm always going to be that broken girl. Nothing's ever going to change." Ivan's heart ached for her. He could see the weight of her past pressing down on her, and the fear that she would never be able to escape it. He had known that the scars from her childhood wouldn't disappear just because she found safety here. But he also knew that she wasn't the same person she had been when she first walked through that door. Maya had come so far, and he wasn't about to let her lose sight of that. "Maya," he said, his voice firm but kind, "you're not broken. You never were. You're carrying a lot, and that's okay. But you don't have to carry it forever. And you don't have to carry it alone." Maya swallowed hard, her tears threatening to spill over. "But what if I can't change? What if this is all I'll ever be?" Ivan shook his head slowly. "You are so much more than that. You've already proven it. The fact that you're here, that you're still fighting, that's proof enough. I've seen you take steps, one at a time. And that's how you heal, Maya. It's not all at once. It's one small step at a time. And I'm here, right beside you, every step of the way." Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of doubt and hope. "I don't know if I can believe that," she whispered. "It's hard to believe anything when the past keeps following you." Ivan reached out, his hand gently resting on hers. "You don't have to believe it all right now. You don't have to see the whole picture. Just trust me when I say that you don't have to stay where you were. You're not stuck. You're just beginning. And I'll be here to help you get there." There was a long pause, and Ivan could see the struggle in her. He could see the fear, the hesitation. But he could also see something else, a flicker of hope, buried deep beneath the doubt. Finally, Maya spoke again, her voice small but determined. "Okay," she said softly. I'll try. One step at a time. Ivan smiled warmly, feeling a weight lift from his chest. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a sudden breakthrough. But it was a step. And that was enough. Together, they would face whatever came next, one step at a time. Ivan's thoughts were scattered as he drove to the outskirts of the city. The drive was longer than usual, and the air outside was crisp, carrying with it a feeling of change. Maya had been quiet again for the last few days, more withdrawn than usual. She still spoke to him, but there was a distance in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Ivan could see it, the uncertainty, the doubt creeping back in, like shadows lurking on the edge of the light. He had known this moment would come. Progress wasn't a straight path. Healing wasn't a linear process. There would be days when Maya felt like she was moving forward, and other days when it seemed like she had fallen back into the same dark place she had been trying to escape. But today was different. Ivan could feel it. The tension in the air was palpable, like the world itself was holding its breath. He had never been a man to back away from a challenge. But this was different. Maya wasn't just a case to fix, a problem to solve. She was a person, someone who had been through more than he could imagine, and all he wanted was for her to find peace. As he pulled into the long driveway of the new house he had just secured for her, Ivan took a deep breath. The house was beautiful, large, but not overwhelming. The kind of place where Maya could start over, but still have room to grow. It wasn't a mansion, but it was perfect in its simplicity. It was a new chapter. It was a place where Maya could truly heal. Ivan parked the car and stepped out, the gravel crunching under his boots. He turned to see Maya, standing in the doorway, her figure small against the backdrop of the house. She didn't look excited. She didn't look scared. She just looked uncertain. She had been quiet during the entire drive, and now that they had arrived, it felt like the weight of the decision was finally settling in. Ivan walked over to her, offering her a gentle smile. "Maya," he said softly, "this is your new home. What do you think?" She didn't answer at first. She just stood there, her eyes scanning the house, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Ivan could see the wheels turning in her mind, the silent calculations as she tried to decide whether this was real or just another fleeting moment of hope that would soon fade. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "It's nice," she said, but there was no excitement in her tone. Ivan felt the familiar knot of worry tighten in his chest. He had hoped that this place, this fresh start, would give her the space to heal. But it was clear that she wasn't ready to embrace it yet. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, his voice steady. "You don't have to do this alone, Maya. This is your chance to have something real. Hey, home. A place where you can be yourself, where you can breathe. But it's up to you when you're ready." Maya looked up at him then, her expression softening. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can live here. I don't know how to live somewhere that's safe." Ivan could hear the vulnerability in her words. She wasn't just scared of the house. She was scared of what it represented, the possibility of truly letting go of her past, of trusting that the safety he had promised her wasn't just temporary. Ivan knelt down in front of her, his eyes level with hers. "Maya," he said, his voice firm but kind, "it's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel like you don't know how to do this. But you don't have to have all the answers today. You just have to take the first step. And I'm here to help you take it." There was a long pause, and for a moment, Maya just stared at the ground, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Ivan gave her the time she needed, not pushing, not rushing her. He knew that this moment was a turning point for her, one that would shape the rest of her journey. Finally, Maya spoke again, her voice barely audible. "I'll try," she said, her words quiet but determined. Ivan smiled softly, a surge of pride welling up in his chest. She didn't have to make this decision right away. She didn't have to embrace everything at once. But she had taken the first step, and that was all that mattered. "That's all I'm asking," Ivan said, standing up and offering her his hand. She hesitated for a moment, but then she took it, her fingers curling around his. Together, they walked into the house, the door clicking softly behind them. Inside, the house was warm, cozy, filled with the promise of new beginnings. There were no expectations, no demands. Just a space for Maya to find herself, to start over. Ivan knew it would take time, but he also knew that they were on the right path. Maya had taken the first step, and together, they would take the next one, and the one after that. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time, it didn't seem so out of reach. Ivan looked over at Maya, who was standing by the window, looking out at the yard. She was quiet, but there was something different in her stance now, something stronger. She wasn't ready to let go of her past, but she was starting to believe that she could create a future, and that was enough. Ivan sat at the kitchen table, his hands clasped together as he stared at the quiet morning outside. The house felt peaceful, but there was an unease in the air that he couldn't shake. Maya had been more withdrawn than usual. She was trying. He could see that, but the walls she had built were still there, too high, too thick. She hadn't spoken much over the last few days, retreating back into the silence that she often turned to when things got overwhelming. Ivan knew better than to push her. She needed space, time to process what had happened, but he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was something more she wasn't sharing. He had promised her that they would face this together, and he was determined to keep that promise. But how do you help someone when they can't, or won't, let you in? The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts, and Ivan turned to see Maya, standing in the doorway, her expression a mixture of hesitation and something else. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear. She was still carrying herself differently, her posture tense, and Ivan could see the strain in her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, her voice soft but steady. Ivan's heart gave a small jolt. He smiled at her, his voice calm. "Of course. Come sit." Maya walked over slowly, her footsteps tentative, like she wasn't sure if she was ready to cross the distance between them. She sat down at the table, her hands nervously tapping on the surface. Ivan waited for her to speak, knowing that if he pressed her, it might only push her further away. For a long moment, Maya didn't say anything. The silence stretched, but Ivan didn't rush her. Finally, she looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time since she had entered the room. "I've been thinking about everything," she began, her voice small, as though the words were heavy on her tongue. Ivan nodded, encouraging her without speaking. "I know you're trying to help me," she continued, "but I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. I don't know if I can do it. I don't know how to start over." Ivan's heart tightened, but he kept his expression neutral, patient. "Maya, you don't have to be ready all at once," he said softly. "You don't have to have it all figured out. This is your journey, and you get to take it at your own pace. No one is rushing you." Maya's eyes filled with uncertainty. "But what if I'm just not strong enough? What if I fail?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ivan reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "Maya, strength isn't about never feeling weak," he said quietly. "It's about being brave enough to keep going even when you feel like you can't. It's about taking the next step, no matter how small it feels. And you're doing that already. Every day, you're moving forward, even if you don't see it yet." Maya looked at him, her fingers tightening around his hand. "But what if I can't keep going? What if I don't have what it takes?" Ivan could feel the fear in her, the vulnerability she was so reluctant to show. He took a deep breath before speaking again, his voice steady. "Maya, you are stronger than you think. You've been through more than most people could ever imagine, and you're still here. You're not just surviving, you're learning to live. That takes courage, more courage than I've ever had." She looked down at their joined hands, her fingers still trembling slightly. "I don't know if I can believe that," she whispered. "It's hard to trust in anything when everything has always been so uncertain." Ivan squeezed her hand gently. "I know it's hard, but trust doesn't come all at once, and it doesn't come easily. It's a choice, a decision to believe in yourself, even when you're not sure. And I believe in you, Maya. I always will." Maya was silent for a long time, her gaze still fixed on their hands. Ivan waited, letting her absorb the words he had said. He wasn't going to pressure her. He was here, and that was all he could offer for now. Finally, she looked up, her eyes meeting his once more. "I don't know what the future holds," she said softly, "but I think I want to try. I think I want to see what it's like to have a future." Ivan's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was progress. Maya was opening up, starting to believe that there was something more for her than just survival. "You don't have to know everything right now," Ivan said. "Just take it one step at a time. That's all anyone can do." She nodded slowly, and for the first time in days, Ivan saw a spark of hope in her eyes. It wasn't a big change, not yet, but it was a shift, a small step toward something new. He stood up, offering her his hand. Let's take that first step together, he said. Maya looked at his hand for a moment, then took it, her grip firm. They didn't need to talk about it anymore. Maya had made the choice to move forward, and Ivan would be right beside her every step of the way. As they stood together, Ivan couldn't help but feel that this was a turning point for both of them. The road ahead was still long, but it no longer seemed so uncertain. Together, they would face whatever came next, one step at a time. Ivan watched as Maya carefully set her school books down on the table. The past few weeks had been filled with ups and downs, but there was a shift now. Maya had become more determined, more focused, though there was still the occasional shadow in her eyes. Memories she couldn't outrun. It was late afternoon, the golden light from the setting sun spilling through the windows, and Maya was sitting at the kitchen table, her head bent over an open book. Ivan watched her for a moment, the way she bit her lip in concentration, how she was so absorbed in the task before her. It wasn't always easy, but she was making progress. The weight of the world was still there, but she was learning how to carry it. As he stood there, watching her, Ivan realized that it was moments like this, moments when she was simply focused on something, her mind occupied with something positive, that gave him hope. They had both been through so much, and yet, here she was, trying. Ivan couldn't help but smile. "How's it going?" he asked, stepping into the room. Maya looked up, startled for a moment before offering him a small smile. "It's okay," she said, though there was a hint of frustration in her voice. "I just don't get this one part. It's like, it's not clicking." Ivan walked over and took a seat beside her, glancing at the page. "Let me see," he said gently, leaning over to look at the problem. They had been through this before. Maya struggled with her schoolwork at times, but she never gave up. She would ask for help when she needed it, even though she hated to admit she didn't have all the answers. Ivan could see the frustration written across her face. It wasn't about the problem in front of her. It was about everything else. Maya had always been afraid of failure, and every setback, no matter how small, seemed to trigger that fear. He understood that. He had seen it in her before. "It's okay to not have all the answers," Ivan said softly, his voice steady. "You're still learning. And learning isn't about being perfect. It's about trying again and again. It's about taking the steps, even when it feels hard." Maya sighed and leaned back in her chair, pushing the book aside. "I don't know why I can't just get it," she muttered, her voice thick with frustration. Ivan turned to her, looking at her with patience. "Maya, you're doing fine. You're learning, and that's what matters. Sometimes it's not about getting everything right the first time. It's about not giving up when things get tough." She didn't respond, but Ivan could see that his words were starting to sink in. She wasn't giving up. She just needed a moment to breathe. They sat in silence for a moment, and Ivan watched as she took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing just a little. He knew that it wasn't just about schoolwork. It was everything else she was carrying. Maya was constantly juggling her fear of failure, her fear of not being good enough, and the weight of the things she had experienced. But he could see her fighting, day by day, to make something better of herself. And that gave him hope. "Maya," Ivan said gently, "you're stronger than you think. You've been through so much, but you're still here. You've made it this far, and that's not by accident." She looked up at him then, her dark eyes full of something, grief, but also determination. "I don't feel strong," she whispered. "I feel like I'm falling behind, like I'm always going to be that broken girl, like I'll never catch up." Ivan's heart ached as he looked at her. He could see the struggle in her eyes, the inner battle that she fought every single day. She had come so far, but she still couldn't see herself the way he saw her. "Maya," he said softly, "you're not broken. You've never been broken. You've just been through things that no one should ever have to go through. And it's okay to feel like you're not sure where to go next. That's part of the process." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "But what if I can't make it?" she asked, her voice cracking. "What if I can't move past everything?" Ivan reached out and gently placed his hand on hers, offering her the kind of comfort he had hoped she would find here. "You don't have to do it all at once," he said quietly. "You just have to keep going, one step at a time. And I'm here with you, always." Maya looked down at their hands, and for a long moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Ivan didn't push her to speak. He simply waited, letting her process the weight of his words. Finally, Maya lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know if I'm ready to let go of everything," she said, her voice small but steady. "But I'm ready to try." Ivan smiled softly, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. She hadn't said it was easy. She hadn't said that she had everything figured out. But she was willing to try. And that was enough. That's all anyone can ask for, Ivan said, his voice filled with warmth. And that's all you need to do. Just try. Every day try. Maya's lips trembled slightly, but she nodded. She didn't smile, but there was a quiet understanding between them, a sense that she was beginning to believe in herself, even if only just a little. Ivan knew that there would be more difficult days ahead, but today, Maya had taken another step. And that step was everything. As they sat there together, in the soft light of the afternoon, Ivan felt a sense of peace settle over him. Maya had been through so much, but with each passing day, she was learning to trust again, to believe in herself. And that, more than anything, was the greatest gift he could give her. The road ahead would still be uncertain, but for the first time, Ivan believed that Maya was ready to face it, one step at a time. Ivan's thoughts were scattered as he sat at his desk, the soft hum of the house around him creating an almost peaceful atmosphere. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. Maya had made strides in so many areas of her life, yet there were still moments when the weight of her past seemed to pull her back. He understood. The scars she carried weren't easily erased, and though she was doing her best to keep moving forward, the road ahead was long and uncertain. And yet, despite the challenges, there was a quiet determination in her that he had never seen before. She had started to believe in the possibility of a different future, and that belief had begun to change everything. This change, however, wasn't without its setbacks. Maya had become quieter again, more withdrawn than she had been in the past few days. It was a familiar pattern. Each time she took a step forward, it seemed that she would take 2 steps back, retreating into herself, unsure if she could truly trust in her own strength. Ivan had been watching her closely, trying not to push too hard. He knew that what Maya needed most right now was time to process everything she had been through. But he also knew that time wasn't always enough. Maya needed more than time. She needed the courage to see herself as worthy, as capable of building a new life. He had given her the tools, the space, and the safety to heal, but ultimately, the decision to move forward had to come from her. That afternoon, as the sun began to set, Ivan found himself in the living room, going over paperwork when he heard the faint sound of footsteps. He looked up and saw Maya, standing in the doorway. She was looking down, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, a subtle sign of the tension she was feeling. Ivan smiled gently at her. "Maya," he said softly, "come sit with me." She didn't say anything at first, but she slowly walked over to the couch, sitting down beside him. Ivan could feel the distance in the air between them, the quiet space that had grown since their last conversation. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy. He knew she was still processing everything. The fear, the uncertainty, and though she was doing better, there were still days when it felt like too much. "What's on your mind?" Ivan asked gently. Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and something else, something that resembled fear. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ivan's heart dropped at her words. He had feared this moment might come, the moment when the weight of everything would become too much to bear. But he didn't want to make her feel like she had to push through it. He didn't want her to think that she had to be strong all the time. "What do you mean?" Ivan asked, his voice calm, trying to give her the space she needed to open up. Maya shifted in her seat, her hands fidgeting nervously. "It's just all of this. Everything that's happened. I feel like I'm constantly trying to catch up, trying to be someone I'm not, trying to be okay when I'm really not." Her voice wavered, and Ivan could see the tears welling up in her eyes. "I feel like I'm not strong enough for this. I'm afraid that I'll never be enough, that no matter how hard I try, I'll always be broken." Ivan's chest tightened. He had heard the doubt in her voice before, but it hit him harder now. Maya had come so far, and yet, the weight of her past still clung to her. He could see it in the way she carried herself, in the way she looked at him now. She wasn't just struggling with the events of her past. She was struggling with the belief that she could move beyond them. Ivan reached over and gently took her hand, his touch steady and comforting. "Maya," he said softly, "you're not broken. You've never been broken. You've been hurt, yes, but you're still here. And that's what matters. You're here, and you're fighting for a better future. That takes strength." Maya shook her head, the tears beginning to fall. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Ivan's heart ached for her. It's okay to not feel strong all the time, he said gently. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out. But what I see in you is something that's stronger than anything you've been through. You have the courage to face what's ahead, even when it scares you. And that's what makes you strong. Maya sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at him, her expression softening. I don't know if I can believe that yet, she whispered. But I want to try. Ivan smiled, squeezing her hand. That's all I'm asking. Just try. One step at a time. I'm here with you, and I always will be. Maya nodded slowly, though there was still doubt in her eyes. But something had shifted in her. She wasn't completely convinced, but she was willing to take that first step. And that was all that mattered. They didn't need to have all the answers right now. They didn't need to know what the future held. What mattered was that they were facing it together. Ivan stood up, offering her his hand. Let's take that first step together, he said. Maya hesitated for a moment, but then she took his hand. They didn't speak as they walked out of the room, but there was a sense of quiet understanding between them. Maya wasn't sure of everything, but she had made the decision to move forward, and that was the beginning of something new. The future was still uncertain, but Ivan believed, for the first time in a long time, that Maya was ready to face it head-on. One step at a time. Ivan watched the light fade outside as he sat in the living room, a heavy silence settling between him and Maya. It had been several weeks since their conversation about moving forward, since she had made the decision to try again, and while there had been progress, there were still moments when the weight of her past seemed to pull her back. He had given her all the space she needed, but he could see the hesitation in her every step. It was hard for her to believe that a different life was possible, that she could truly have the future she deserved. The road to healing was never straightforward, and Ivan knew that better than anyone. They had come so far together, but there was still so much left to confront. As the evening wore on, Ivan found himself unable to focus. He stood up from his chair and walked across the room, where Maya was sitting quietly by the window. Her face was partially illuminated by the soft glow of the streetlights outside, and there was a distant look in her eyes, as if she was lost in thoughts she wasn't ready to share. Ivan hesitated for a moment, unsure of whether he should approach her or give her more time. But then, he realized that the silence between them had become too loud, too heavy. He walked over and sat beside her, just close enough for her to feel his presence, but not too close to make her uncomfortable. Maya, Ivan said softly, are you okay? She didn't immediately respond, her gaze still fixed on the outside world. But then, after a long pause, she looked at him. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of vulnerability and doubt, as if she was struggling to find the right words. I don't know if I can keep going, she admitted quietly. Ivan's heart sank at her words. He had hoped that with every step she took, the weight would become lighter, but it was clear that Maya was still carrying a burden far heavier than he had realized. What do you mean? Ivan asked gently, his voice steady but concerned. I've been trying so hard, Maya continued, her voice trembling slightly. But it feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough. I feel like I'm stuck in this place between my past and my future, and I don't know how to get out. Ivan could hear the frustration in her voice, the sense of hopelessness that had crept back into her words. He knew this wasn't just about the past few weeks, about the difficulties she had faced with school or the changes she was trying to make in her life. This was deeper. It was the fear of never truly escaping her past, of never being able to leave behind the things that had shaped her, even if she tried to move forward. Maya, Ivan said softly, his tone unwavering. I know it's hard. I know you're struggling. But I also know that you've come so far. You've taken more steps toward healing than you realize, even on the days when it feels impossible. Maya shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. It doesn't feel like I've done anything, she whispered. It doesn't feel like I'm making any progress. I'm just stuck. Ivan reached out, placing a hand gently on hers. You're not stuck, he said firmly. You're still moving forward, even when it doesn't feel that way. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's not a straight path. Some days will be harder than others, and some days, you might feel like you're back at the beginning. But you're not. You're farther along than you think. Maya looked down at their hands, her fingers curling slightly around his. I don't know if I can keep doing this, she said, her voice filled with doubt. What if I can't change? What if I'm always going to be this broken person? Ivan felt his heart ache at her words, but he refused to let her see his worry. Maya, he said gently, you are not broken. You've been through more than anyone should have to, but that doesn't define who you are. It's just part of your story, not the whole story. And the fact that you're still here, that you're still fighting, that's what matters. She looked up at him then, her eyes filled with so many emotions that Ivan wasn't sure where to start. I want to believe that, she whispered, her voice so small, but it's hard. I don't know how to stop feeling like I'm never enough. Ivan squeezed her hand, his voice steady and comforting. You are enough, Maya. You always have been. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just need to take it one step at a time, and that's exactly what you're doing. Maya didn't respond immediately, her gaze dropping to their hands. Ivan could feel the weight of her emotions, the battle she was fighting inside. He wasn't going to solve everything in one conversation, but he had to keep showing her that she wasn't alone in this. He wasn't going anywhere. You've made it this far, Ivan said, his voice filled with warmth. That's proof enough of your strength. Every day you're moving forward, and even on the days when it feels like you're not, you're still making progress. It's not about getting everything right. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. Maya looked up at him, her expression softening slightly. She still wasn't sure, still wasn't convinced, but there was something in her eyes that wasn't there before, a hint of trust, a spark of hope. Okay, she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I'll try. I'll keep trying. Ivan smiled, his heart lifting with pride. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was enough. It was a promise to herself that she wasn't ready to give up, that she would keep fighting, no matter how hard it got. That's all I can ask for, Ivan said, his voice filled with love and reassurance. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't have to be anything other than what you are. And you're enough, Maya. You always will be. For the first time in a long time, Maya smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. It was a smile that said she was beginning to believe, even if just a little, that maybe she could start over, that maybe she could create a future for herself. Ivan reached over and gently hugged her, feeling the weight of her journey in that moment, but also the lightness of her decision to keep moving forward. Together, they would face whatever came next, one step at a time. Ivan sat quietly in the living room, the familiar hum of the house around him, and yet it felt different now. Maya had come a long way, farther than Ivan ever thought possible when she first arrived at his door. She was still learning, still growing, but she was no longer the same girl who had walked into this house, filled with doubt and fear. There were days when she struggled, when the weight of her past threatened to pull her back, but each day she was learning how to move past it, one small step at a time. Ivan smiled to himself as he thought about how far she had come. She had faced so many challenges, but she was stronger now, more confident, more sure of herself. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it was real progress. The phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He picked it up, his eyes still on the empty space where Maya had been sitting earlier, lost in her own thoughts. Hello. Ivan answered. Mr. Caldwell came. The voice on the other end, the familiar tone of Detective Hayes. We've made some progress in Maya's case. We've tracked down the people involved with her mother's past. There's still some work to do, but we're getting closer. Ivan felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had known that her past was still lurking, threatening to pull her back, but now there was hope. There was a chance for justice, for closure. That's good to hear, Ivan said, his voice steady but full of gratitude. Thank you for keeping me informed. Of course, the detective replied. We'll be in touch soon with more details. But for now, I just wanted to let you know that things are moving in the right direction. Ivan hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The thought of Maya's past finally being confronted, of the people who had hurt her being held accountable, it gave him a sense of peace, but it also reminded him of how far Maya still had to go. She had been through so much already, and now there was this new layer to navigate. Ivan knew that this would not be easy for her, but he also knew that she was ready. Maya had shown so much courage already, and now it was her time to confront the rest of her past, to heal fully. He stood up and walked toward the kitchen, where Maya had just walked in, holding a mug of tea. She smiled when she saw him, but there was still a quiet sadness in her eyes, the kind that lingered after everything she had been through. How are you doing? Ivan asked, his voice gentle. Better, Maya said softly, but there was still uncertainty in her tone. But I know there's more to deal with. More that I have to face. Ivan nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. You're doing great, Maya. I know it's hard, but you're not doing it alone. And you don't have to do it all at once. You just keep taking it one day at a time. Maya looked at him, her eyes searching his face. Do you think I can really move on from everything? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ivan smiled softly. I think you're already doing it. You're facing it every day, and that takes more courage than you'll ever know. Maya didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him, her eyes filled with so many emotions. Ivan could see the fear, the doubt, but also the hope that was starting to grow in her. He could see the person she was becoming, the person who was ready to step into the future. I'm scared, Maya said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I'm scared of what comes next. But I want to try. I want to keep moving forward. Ivan nodded, his heart swelling with pride. That's all you can do, Maya. And you're doing it. You're moving forward. And I'll be right here, every step of the way. Maya smiled, just a little, but it was enough. It was a smile that said she believed in herself, even if just a little, and that was everything Ivan had hoped for. They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared understanding between them. It wasn't about the destination. It wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about the journey, the steps they were both taking, side by side. Together, they would face whatever came next. They didn't need to know all the answers right now. They didn't need to rush. What mattered was that they were moving forward. And for the first time, Ivan felt confident in the future. The world outside was still full of uncertainties, but they were stronger now, both of them. And with each passing day, they were healing. Together.